In this video, we're going to learn how to make this camo cowl, and I am making this video with the complete beginner in mind. By the end of this, you will be able to make this even if you've never used your knitting machine before. And also, I'm going to show you how to close it so that it looks like a professional seamed it together. Welcome to Yarn Checker. I'm Sophronia. Let me show you the seam. See where my finger's running along? That is where I stitched the cowl together. And as you can see, it's pretty good. Of course, if you're looking super close, you're going to be able to tell. But from even a slight distance, you can't really see where we sewed it together. Now, see there where I pinched it? You can see that is where I put the ends of the scarf together. And you can see that, but just looking at it regularly, the seam completely blends in, and that is what we are going to do with this cowl. It's important to use a yarn that plays well with your machine. And so for this project, I'm using a Red Heart Super Saver because I never have any problems with this yarn dropping stitches. The color combo is Camouflage, and this is a size 4 100% acrylic yarn. And I just like the camo colors and the variegated yarn effect. You will need waste yarn. So this waste yarn is also a size 4 acrylic yarn, and it's in a contrasting color. And the reason why we're using this is because it's going to make it easier for you to hem up your seam, to sew up the ends of your scarf by using this. And just stick with me here, follow along, and everything will work out fine. You want to go to your first needle on your machine, hook your yarn under that needle, leaving about a 2 to 3 inch tail, and then hold the yarn for, you want to hold the tail, the yarn tail, just until the yarn is secured under the first needle. Then go with your yarn behind the next needle, in front of the next, behind the next, in front of the next. I'm going to show you, kind of exaggerate the look here. So behind, in front, and then behind, in front. You get the point. And you're going to continue doing this slowly. Take your time with it until you get all the way around back to, you want to make your way to the last needle on your machine. We've arrived at the white needle, which is last. Stick your yarn through your yarn feeder and then through your tensioner, and then begin turning your machine. After you've completed your 5 rounds of waste yarn, cut your yarn. You just need to leave a tail that's a few inches long. Put the yarn to the side of the last needle. Then with your scarf yarn, again leaving a 2 to 3 inch tail, hook that underneath the first needle. Turn your machine to secure that yarn. Then stick the yarn down through the yarn feeder and down through your tensioner. Hold the yarn tail just until the yarn is secure, and then continue cranking. Also, it's very helpful if you keep your yarn loose when you're using your knitting machine. So here I am, I'm pulling a lot of yarn out of the skein, and this way I can just crank more freely and for a longer period of time. You can loosely tie the 2 yarn ends from the waste yarn and the scarf yarn. I just tied it one time. Once your work gets close to the bottom of your table, just fold it up or just roll it onto itself, and that way it's not dragging. Then once you've completely finished your scarf, go ahead and cut your yarn, put it to the side of the last needle, and now we're adding waste yarn again, and you're going to hook that under the first needle like you did before. Put your yarn through your yarn feeder and through your tensioner, and again you just need approximately 5 more rounds of the waste yarn. The work has been removed from the machine, and so now what you're looking at is just a knitted tube that is open on both ends. So let's take a look at one end. I'm going to show you how to close this up. Take your yarn ends. What I do is I take them and I have them to the left. If I'm facing the work, it's to the left. And then I go down to, or actually go ahead and untie those yarn ends, those yarn tails. That's why you wanted to keep it loose. You wanted to only tie it loosely. So go down to the other end, and what you're going to do is you're looking for a perpendicular stitch. See that stitch right there? That is perpendicular to the outermost top stitches and is perpendicular to the outermost bottom stitches. Then get you a crochet hook. I think this is an eye, but you can use whatever size you're comfortable with. Stick your hook underneath the perpendicular stitch and then go underneath the top stitch closest to the perpendicular stitch and pull your hook through. And then go to the bottom stitch that's closest to that perpendicular stitch and pull that loop. It's okay. This is real life. If you mess up, just stick it back underneath there. Pull that bottom loop through. And at all times, you're only going to be left with one loop on your hook. Once you go to that next top stitch, you have 2 loops, but then you're going to pull the uppermost one through and you're left with 1 loop. And then you're repeating that. You're going from the top to the bottom and you get all the way to the other end, which we are now. Now I'm working on this last bottom loop. I pulled that through. And then sometimes when you get to the other end, I kind of have to pull the waste yarn and really take a good look and make sure that I'm not missing any stitches. So I found 1 more stitch there at the top. So I'm going to go ahead and pull. Oh, I found 2 more stitches, 1 at the top and 1 at the bottom. So once you've gone all the way to the other end, which your very last step is to take your yarn tail from the scarf yarn tail. You want to yarn over your hook and you want to pull your yarn tail all the way through. And now what you just did see, that's how it looks when it's done. And then you're just going to repeat that on the other side. Now it's time you want to weave in your yarn end. So thread an embroidery needle or yarn needle, and then you're just going to feed that through your scarf, and you're going to hide that yarn end and then just cut it. Truly, a cowl is a very short infinity scarf. So what we need to do now is to sew together the edges of this work to turn it into a loop so that it is actually a cowl. I'm using contrasting yarn, but of course you want to use yarn that matches your scarf. So go ahead and thread your yarn needle. I keep wanting to call it a tapestry needle. Is it the same? Go ahead and thread that. And you want to have about a yarn that's like 4 to 5 times the length of your edge. We're going to go into can you see there? See those two, I guess, those 2 bars that make up a stitch? You want to go into do you see the seam right here? You're going to be working on the stitches right underneath the seam there. And at the top, see that seam there? You're going to be working on the stitches above that seam on that part. So right now we're at the bottom, and you're going to pull through that stitch, which is 2 bars. You can see I'm just lining them up to make sure I'm at the very edge. And then you're going to go underneath the stitch at the top and go ahead and pull your yarn through. When you do that, make sure you leave a bit of a tail. Now we're going to go back to the bottom right here, and we're going into the next stitch. We're going underneath the 2 bars of the next stitch at the bottom. Go through, see those 2? Pull your yarn through, pull your needle through, and then actually go through the 2 bars at the top. You can go through them both at the same time like I did, or you can go through them separately. And see there, we're starting to seam together our cowl. And can you see that? See how the white stitches, they're kind of matching up, they're lining up with the other stitches in the scarf. So again, now we're onto the 3rd stitch at the bottom, and we're going to take our needle and go through both bars of that bottom of that stitch that's right below the seam. And now I'm also going through the 2 bars of the stitch at the top. When you're doing this, you don't want to pull your stitches too tight, because the hope is that you make them about the same length as the original stitches, and that way the seam will blend in with the stitches that are already on your cowl. And can you see that? It's kind of hard to see, but see how the bars, see how they're all lining up? When you do that with the right color yarn, you're not even going to be able to see your seam. And then you want to do that all the way across, and then you want to flip your cowl over, and you're going to do it all the way across the back side. And see, that's what we have here. See, I've done the one side. I've gone all the way across with the right color this time. And I want you to be able to see what the back side is going to look like when you flip it over. As you can see, the 2 ends of your scarf, you see that? They're right up against each other. They're just right against each other. And so you're just going to continue stitching around, and you're going to wind up covering up that seam.